And that's the act of laying down that character in order to create a new one.
Hello and welcome to the Pacific Channel, where you learn about the law of attraction, how to manifest anything you want, meditation, and more. So in part 1 of this 2-part series, Dr. Joe Dispenza talked about the problem with a lot of us is that we get stuck in our thoughts and memories of the past. We freeze frame an event from the past and keep reminding ourselves about it. And then we get stuck recreating our reality based upon that frozen frame or image in our minds. Then he talked about how the challenge is to catch ourselves in the act of thinking old thoughts that lower our vibration, old thoughts that make us feel sad, guilty, angry, disappointment, or even depression. In part 1, we talked about how our subconscious minds, that primal, outdated, old version of who we are, mainly wants to keep us safe. And in its efforts to keep us safe, it remembers, rehashes, and thinks about past negative events so that we don't repeat them again. It will literally remind you of negative things so that you don't do them again. But via the law of attraction, you attract what you think about, whether you want it or not. So if you allow fearful thoughts from the past to haunt your present mind thinking, you will attract more things to be fearful about. Dr. Joe didn't mention this exactly, but he probably would agree that through the law of attraction, you attract what you think about and what you feel. So, to break free from the program, to escape this 3D matrix of reality, we must catch ourselves. We must govern our own thought. That's the work. In part 2, which is this video, Dr. Joe explains that what we must do is to freeze frame an image of the future that we want, and then make it so clear in our minds, so big and so prominent that it supersedes the images of the past. He then talks about the benefits of doing the work and how to do it. Let's listen to Dr. Joe now.
And yet, when the person really begins to work and labor for that present moment, the liberation that takes place from the body, that energy that's being released, is the down-regulating of those emotional responses. And that is taking chemistry that's been conditioned in the body and it's releasing it as energy, as information. And energy starts moving up towards the brain and out from the body's field. And it's important for us to remember that when we feel safe and we're out of survival, there is a whole nother level that we have to remember, and that we are the creators. And once again, we have the free will to create. So could I then, in the absence of any stimulation from my outer environment or for my body in space and time, could I freeze a frame of the future that I could become fascinated with and fixated on? And that freezing of that frame in the future is producing a feeling now that is no longer a familiar feeling that I've already experienced, but what would it feel like if it happened, and to condition our bodies to be in the emotion of that future. To the materialist that's reliant on the outer world to produce the feeling, this is the challenge for us as human beings. To remember that we are the creators, and if we can feel the feeling in our heart, the divine aspect of wholeness, of oneness, of less separation starts to happen. We start to feel connected to our future. And that's a big, big release of energy and information into the quantum field. It's a big splash. And that's a carrier wave of content that is a greater frequency of thought that's carrying information equal to that frequency. And you're conditioning your body now into the emotions of your future before the experience occurs. This is the creative process. And the person who's relaxed and awake and who does this enough times, in a state of wholeness, their body's believing it's living in that environment. And we have data to suggest that if you do it for 7 days at a week-long event, and you start thinking differently, and you start believing in different things, and you start believing in yourself, and you start believing in your future, and you start practicing feeling those emotions, and you walk in your walking meditation and try it out with your eyes open, practice becoming it, you're reprogramming on a lot of levels. And the body starts responding less to the conditions in its typical environment, and it clings to the new conditioning subconsciously of that emotional state. And yeah, we bounce around in our environment and we have challenges, but the people who healed themselves in this work made their way back to those feelings. They reasoned that feeling the emotion of the future before it happened would be really signaling the gene ahead of the environment. Now, that's important because that's what's rewriting the genetic program. That's what's upscaling the information in the cell. And it turns out that when we do this properly, we suppress the thinking brain in time and suppress the analytical mind, and our brain waves change, not only change to that creative state, but very coherent. And when we're relaxed in our heart, we have such profound data to show that the brain moves into a state of resonance, that delta waves are carrier waves for theta waves, and theta waves are a harmonic that carry alpha waves, and alpha carries beta, and beta carries high beta, and high beta goes into high gamma and higher and higher and higher levels of gamma. That kind of symphony of order that's taking place between the heart and the brain, that relaxed and awake state, is the emission of energy into this invisible field. And that field, of course, is you connecting to something, some possibility before it happens, and that is the creative process. Turns out that the people who healed themselves of all different kinds of health conditions, you pay attention to their stories, it comes to a point where you realize that they're not trying to heal. They have made up their mind that the process is that if I change, my body changes. If I change my thoughts, if I change my emotions, if I change my behaviors, that on some level, then if I could take on another character and reprogram it over and over again and rehearse who I'm going to be with my eyes open and remember it. Remember what it takes to be compassionate. Remember what it takes to forgive. Remember what it takes to stay in your state of wholeness or love. And that playing in the simulator with your eyes open and being divine. There's not a lot of evidence in the world around us that says that it's okay to do that. And yet, people in this work are actually doing that very supernatural thing. They're reprogramming their body, and they understand that they can't program it from inside the simulator. That's where the program exists. They got to get outside of it. They have to get beyond it. They have to get beyond their personality to create a new personality. They got to get beyond their personal reality to create a new personal reality. They got to get beyond their emotions of the familiar past or the obsession of the predictable future and the fascination that goes with that future that is just a recollection of the past and the emotions that go along with it. They understand that's how their body is actually going to heal. I listened to their testimonials. So many times it's them talking about when they open their eyes and live their life. How are they living their life? When you listen to them speak, they'll say, I really had an amazing moment. I opened my heart more than I did before, and I was just remembering that when I do that, my body's believing it's living in a new reality. And I want my body to believe it's living in this reality, and I got to stay here no matter what, or whatever circumstance. And people say, oh my God, they did their meditations 3 times a day, some of them twice a day. Not because they thought it was the right thing to do or the good thing to do or try harder. It was practical. The practical application is I lost my level of consciousness. I lost my level of awareness, and I went unconscious again back into the program. Well, when it becomes about that for us, when it becomes about that the guardian at the gate is what you actually accept, believe, and surrender to be the truth, your truth, my truth, without any analysis. And having that awareness to catch those thoughts, I want you to know, is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process for me. You can get better at it by catching yourself in the act because you've caught yourself in the act so many times in your meditation. Or you can ask yourself at the end of the day, how did I do today? When did I lose it? Now, most people don't want to ask that question. Or what were my successes? What did I do well today? How did I get back when it was so easy? And I always say and I say this to myself all the time, when it matters the most is when it's the hardest, because it goes against all those programs, and those programs are programs for survival. And so when energy makes it to the heart, it produces that external field. We see this beautiful synchronization between the heart and the brain that takes place. The person feels connected. They can rewrite a program in that moment. They feel connected to their future. They're no longer separate or looking for it. They feel like on some level it already happens. You ask those people that stood on the stage and talked about their own personal healing if it was worth the effort. if it was worth it. They'll tell you every single time, I'm not the same person I used to be. They'll tell you that. They'll tell you I changed. I changed so many things about myself. And the people who keep showing up and saying, and I do this myself, I can't say that this work doesn't work. I can't say that any longer. I've seen too many people actually be the example, and we have evidence that really keeps blowing our minds scientifically. So then, at what point do we stop believing that we create our reality? At what point? What is that point where we default and we return back to the old belief? It's that process, I think, that is the ongoing process. And so at the end of the day, the inventory of how we lived one lifetime in one day should be the last thought on our mind. And then we should be the governor of those thoughts and become so familiar, so conscious of them that we don't go unconscious of them ever again. That is the awakening process, from going from that state of unconsciousness or lost in the dream to an awakening process. And so I wanted to talk to you about this because we can come up with so many reasons when we're in the simulator here in the three-dimensional world and separation for us to feel certain ways. And gosh, the chemical rush from the senses to the brain that produces the emotions becomes the thrill for the first three energy centers. And yet, if we're truly interested in being on the path, being on the journey, moving that energy into your heart somehow makes a whole different set of chemicals and a whole different set of hormones, accompanied with a whole different set of thoughts, a different level of consciousness, a different level of awareness, a different set of behaviors, a different state of feelings. And certainly those thoughts tend to be more elevated, and they tend to be more unifying and more considerate of the whole, and more in a sense of cooperation or communing in some way. And that is how the species then of human beings collectively begin to coexist. And that's the work that we're hopeful for. And so doing the work then, and when we catch ourselves connecting to those memories of the past and then those obsessions of the future and corresponding emotions that go along with them, and catching ourselves that we're complaining or we're making excuses or we're judging or whatever that is, that the act of doing that is doing the work. That is why it's the work in the beginning, because we have to tend our own gardens, and we have to be the governors at the door, and we have to be the guardians at the gate in order for us to begin that process of change. And I wanted to just emphasize the fact that when you're doing the meditations and that they come up, those are the valuable moments where you're actually coming up against some program or some unconscious belief. And to be curious enough and brave enough and courageous enough to really look to see what's on the other side of it somehow seems to lead people to a greater experience of life. They somehow get an upgrade in their bodies. They somehow have some change in their perception of the illusion in the simulator. There's something new, there's something different, there's new opportunities, there's an unknown, there's a door. And they're not reliving that same familiar future based on the past. They're in a new future and in a new time. And you can't get that from inside the simulator. You have to get outside of it, and that's the act of laying down that character in order to create a new one. So just stay conscious on a daily basis. That is the work.
So, as Dr. Joe said, the key to this work is through meditation, and the goal is to get relaxed in the heart while being conscious and awake in the brain. When the brain and the heart get into coherence, we then have access to multiple levels of brainwave activity, including the gamma brainwave state, where it seems that the mystical, miraculous happens. This is when people have powerful, blissful moments of connection with their true selves. This is where instant healing happens. This is where you can literally upgrade your body to a new mind, as Dr. Joe says. As he stated, the benefit is that you start believing in yourself, believing in your future, and your body follows your belief system. When you truly believe in your better future more than your past, you signal the genes ahead of time, and the body responds by upregulating the cells in your body to your preferred state of being. It's quite amazing how he explains it. You have the power to reprogram your mind, your body, and your life. You quite literally are your own programmer. So Program away. What do you want? Who do you want to be? And then the work is to feel the feeling of your future reality as already being true. The work is to feel those feelings not just during your meditation, but also in your awakened state. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And now be and stay conscious. Catch yourself having those old thoughts and memories. Discard them and focus on the new image of yourself and what you want to manifest. Make that new image of your new life so big and bright that it outshines everything else. In the comments below, let us know what your new image looks like. Thank you for watching and have a great day or night.